For over a century, historians pictured Billy the Kid exactly the same way. I mean, you've probably seen it. A cold-blooded frontier killer with his Colt revolver strapped tightly to his left hip.
Right, yeah.
And that belief was so absolute that Hollywood even made a film about it. I think it starred Paul Newman, and it was literally called The Left-Handed Gun.
Mm-hmm.
But history had it entirely backward, literally backward.
Yeah, the only authenticated photo of him, the famous one, was a ferrotype. And historians eventually realized that image was playing a massive trick on everyone who looked at it.
The trick of the camera, right?
Exactly. It's the actual chemistry of 19th century photography. A ferrotype, or a tintype, doesn't use a negative the way later film cameras did. The image is exposed directly onto a sensitized iron plate.
So there's no negative to flip during the printing process.
Right, which means the resulting photograph is a direct positive. It produces a perfect mirror image. So left is right and right is left. When researchers finally scrutinized the Winchester rifle he's holding in that photo, they noticed the loading port was actually on the wrong side.
Oh, wow. So he wasn't left-handed at all.
No, he was completely right-handed.
And, that optical illusion is really the perfect lens for today's deep dive. Because so much of what you probably think you know about the American frontier is exactly that. It's a reversed image or a trick of the light or, a dime novel myth manufactured just to sell books.
Absolutely. The mythology completely swallowed the reality.
Right. So today we are opening up a detailed, story-driven biography to separate the man from the mythology.
Yeah.
We are tracking Henry McCarty, alias William H. Bonney, who is universally known to history as Billy the Kid.
It's quite a story.
It really is. Our mission today is to trace his life from an impoverished orphan teenager on the streets of New York all the way to a 21-year-old legend bleeding out in a darkened bedroom in the New Mexico territory.
And, to understand how a person actually becomes a legend, we have to strip away that romanticized outlaw archetype. We have to ground ourselves in the desperate reality of his early life.
Yeah, because it's rough.
It's incredibly rough. The sheer density of trauma he experienced before his voice even dropped is staggering. I mean, it completely reframes his later actions.
Well, let's look at those origins.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't born in the dusty Southwest riding a horse, right?
No, not at all.
He was born Henry McCarty to Irish Catholic parents in the slums of New York City. This was likely around 1859. And the family eventually moves west to New Mexico, but any chance at a normal life just shatters in 1874.
Right. His mother, Catherine, dies of tuberculosis.
Yeah. And Henry's just 14 years old.
And the death of his mother creates this critical vacuum in his life. His stepfather, a man named William Antrim, simply abandons Henry and his younger brother, Joseph.
He just leaves them.
Just leaves them. So they are left as orphans in a harsh frontier environment with absolutely zero social safety net. Henry is taken in by a local boarding house owner, but he's forced to work just to cover his room and board.
That's a lot for a 14-year-old to handle.
It is. And this intense vulnerability perfectly sets the stage for his very first arrest in 1875.
Right, and we should be clear here. This arrest wasn't for robbing a stagecoach or, pulling a bank heist.
Yeah, no bank heists yet.
He was a 15-year-old boy caught stealing food. And if you map his situation onto the modern day, he's a runaway. He's a foster kid who just fell through the cracks of a non-existent system.
Exactly. And the historical record pushes back hard on this pervasive Hollywood narrative that he was born this ruthless, sociopathic killer.
Yeah, he was. Quite literally, a starving orphan stealing pounds of butter and cheese just to survive.
But desperation accelerates people. Just 10 days after being caught stealing food, Henry and another man rob a Chinese laundry. They steal clothes and 2 pistols.
Okay, so escalating a bit.
Right. He's jailed, but the local sheriff doesn't take the teenager very seriously. So Henry escapes just 2 days later by literally shimmying up a chimney.
Oh, man. Up a chimney.
Yep. He flees the New Mexico territory entirely and crosses into the unforgiving Arizona territory. He's now a wanted fugitive, working grueling jobs as a ranch hand. And because of his youth, his slight build, and his clean-shaven face, the older cowboys start calling him Kid Antrim.
Kid Antrim, which means we essentially have a scrawny teenager trying to navigate one of the harshest, most violent environments on Earth.
Yeah, it was brutal.
And this leads to a complete reinvention of his identity, because by 1877, he realizes the names Kid Antrim and Henry McCarty carry too much baggage.
The law is looking for them.
Right, so he drops the names completely and starts calling himself William H. Bonney.
And it is under the name William H. Bonney that the violence truly escalates. In August 1877, in a small Arizona village saloon, Bonney gets into a physical altercation with a local blacksmith named Francis Cahill. People called him Windy Cahill.
And the context here is super vital.
It really is. Cahill was a grown man, he was physically imposing, and he had a documented history of bullying the teenager.
Right.
So, on this particular day, Cahill repeatedly calls Bonney a pimp. Bonney retaliates by calling Cahill a son of a bitch.
Those are fighting words in a frontier saloon.
Oh, absolutely. The blacksmith tackles the teenager, throwing him to the saloon floor, and they violently struggle for Bonney's revolver. Bonney manages to fire, shooting Cahill in the gut, and Cahill dies the following day.
Okay, so when you look at the primary sources from that saloon, how did the actual witnesses view that shooting? Like, did they see a cold-blooded killer finding an excuse to pull a trigger? Or was it a kid defending himself against a much larger, violent adult?
The witness testimony heavily points to the latter. One primary account states plainly, and I'm quoting here, Billy had no choice. He had to use his equalizer.
His equalizer meaning the gun.
Right. In the context of frontier honor culture, and considering the massive physical disparity between a grown blacksmith and a malnourished teenager, witnesses recognized it as self-defense.
Makes sense.
But Bonney understood that a local judge might not care about the nuances of self-defense when an Arizona local was dead. So he fled back to New Mexico.
And that journey back to New Mexico sounds like an absolute nightmare.
It was.
I mean, his horse is stolen by Apaches in the desert. He is forced to walk miles upon miles through arid wilderness just to reach the nearest settlement, which was Fort Stanton.
Yeah, walking through the desert with nothing.
By the time he arrives, he is starving and literally near death. He only survives because a local family, the Jones family, takes him in and nurses him back to health.
Which really highlights his situation. By the time Bonney is 18 years old, he has already endured a lifetime of starvation, physical assault, and bare-knuckle survival.
Yeah, a lifetime packed into 18 years.
Exactly. His psychology is forged entirely by the understanding that no institution is coming to save him. The system is broken. And this primes him perfectly for the defining conflict of his life.
The Lincoln County War.
Yes, the Lincoln County War.
Let's lay out the mechanics of that war. Because if you map this conflict onto modern events, it reads less like a classic Western shootout and more like a violent, hostile corporate takeover.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Because in Lincoln County, two Irish-American businessmen, Lawrence Murphy and James Dolan, held an absolute monopoly.
They ran everything.
Yeah, they controlled the beef contracts for the local military fort, they owned the only dry goods store, and crucially, they essentially owned the local law enforcement. Sheriff William J. Brady was firmly in their pocket.
Enter John Tunstall. He was a wealthy English rancher and businessman. Tunstall and his lawyer partner, Alexander McSween, arrive in Lincoln County explicitly to break the Murphy-Dolan monopoly.
They want a piece of the pie.
Right. They open a competing store and start bidding on the exact same lucrative contracts. And Bonney, who is just looking for steady work, gets hired as a cowboy for Tunstall.
And the tension eventually snaps. In February 1878, a posse assembled by Sheriff Brady rides out to seize Tunstall's property over a disputed legal debt.
A very questionable debt.
Very. So Tunstall rides out to try and talk them down. Instead, members of the sheriff's posse shoot him in the chest, knock him off his horse, take Tunstall's own gun, and shoot him in the back of the head. I mean, it's a blatant execution.
You call it an execution, and morally it was, but under Dolan's deeply corrupt legal framework, it was technically a lawful property seizure executed by deputized men.
Wow.
And that is what makes the frontier justice system so terrifying during this era. The violence was entirely state-sanctioned.
Right, they had badges.
Exactly. Now, Bonney, who actually respected Tunstall, attempts to go through legal channels first. He and others swear out murder warrants against the posse.
But the system is corrupt.
Highly corrupt. When the system ignores the warrants, Bonney joins a vigilante group called the Regulators to avenge Tunstall's death.
And Lincoln County just immediately devolves into a war zone. The Regulators decide to handle Sheriff Brady themselves, so they ambush him and his deputies in the street. Bonney is wounded in the thigh during the crossfire, but Brady is killed.
And that's a huge turning point.
Oh, yeah. Bonney is now officially charged with the murder of a sitting sheriff. This escalating retaliation culminates in the massive 1878 Battle of Lincoln.
The Battle of Lincoln is a staggering event to read about. It is a grueling 5-day siege. Bonney and several dozen Regulators are trapped inside Alexander McSween's house in the middle of town.
5 days trapped in a house.
Right. And the Murphy-Dolan faction surrounds them with snipers. The stalemate only breaks when the local military commander arrives with government troops.
The military gets involved.
Yes. And the military's presence tips the scales entirely to the Murphy-Dolan faction, who then proceed to literally set the house on fire to burn the Regulators alive.
It's hard to wrap your head around that. A local sheriff's department utilizing military forces just to burn a teenager and his allies out of a house.
It really shows the level of corruption.
So Bonney and the surviving Regulators hold out inside until all but one room of the house is consumed by flames. They finally make a desperate break for it, fleeing the burning building into the night.
Pure chaos.
And the chaos. McSween is shot and killed, and Bonney shoots and kills a man named Robert Beckwith before vanishing into the darkness.
So Bonney emerges from the ashes of the Lincoln County War as a highly visible, wanted fugitive. But the political landscape of the territory shifts dramatically right after this.
Right, Washington steps in.
In late 1878, the federal government appoints a new territorial governor, Lew Wallace, with a strict mandate to clean up the rampant corruption and violence in New Mexico. And Wallace issues a sweeping amnesty proclamation for anyone involved in the Lincoln County War.
But there is a massive catch.
Always a catch.
The amnesty excludes anyone who has already been indicted for a crime. Because Bonney had been indicted for the murder of Sheriff Brady, he is left off the list.
He's still a wanted man.
Yeah. But instead of fleeing, Bonney does something really surprising. He writes a letter directly to Governor Wallace. He offers to provide insider testimony about a completely different, high-profile murder, the killing of an attorney named Houston Chapman, if the governor will grant him a full pardon.
And Governor Wallace actually accepts the offer.
That's wild to me.
It is. A territorial governor holding a clandestine meeting with a teenage outlaw shows just how desperate the government was to secure a star witness. So, they meet secretly in Lincoln in March 1879.
Face to face.
Face to face. They orchestrate this complex plan. Bonney will submit to a staged arrest to protect him from the Murphy-Dolan hitmen. He will sit in custody, testify in court, and in exchange, Wallace will pardon him and set him free.
And Bonney actually fulfills his end of the bargain perfectly. I mean, he allows himself to be captured, he gives his statement, and he testifies in open court.
He does everything they asked.
But after the testimony is complete, the local district attorney double-crosses him. He refuses to honor the deal and refuses to let Bonney go.
Total betrayal.
Bonney sits in a jail cell for weeks, realizing that Governor Wallace has either intentionally tricked him or is just politically powerless to stop the corrupt district attorney. Recognizing he's about to face the hangman, Bonney slips out of the Lincoln County Jail and goes back on the run.
And think about what this does to him psychologically. That betrayal fundamentally alters Bonney's worldview. He attempted to interact with the legal system in good faith, and the system proved to be just as deceitful as the cartels it claimed to fight.
Yeah, what if they had just kept their word? Would he have just faded into history as an obscure, law-abiding ranch hand?
It's very possible, but instead, any lingering respect for the law just evaporates. He realizes the badge is just a piece of metal used to legitimize murder.
Which brings us to a moment in January 1880 that perfectly illustrates how calculating he had become.
Oh, the saloon encounter.
Yes. Bonney is drinking in a saloon in Fort Sumner. He receives a warning that a newcomer in the bar, a man named Joe Grant, is actually a bounty hunter looking to kill him.
A very dangerous situation.
But instead of drawing his gun or starting a brawl, Billy walks right up to Grant, admires his revolver, and asks if he can examine it.
And Grant makes the fatal mistake of handing the weapon over. This is where Bonney's understanding of firearms mechanics saves his life. He notices the cylinder only has 3 cartridges loaded. With subtle, practiced movements, he rotates the cylinder so that the next time the trigger is pulled, the hammer will fall on an empty chamber.
Wow.
And then he casually hands the weapon back to Grant.
I love this detail so much. He essentially short-circuits Grant's weapon by using the mechanics of a single-action revolver against him. It's like a lethal, high-stakes game of chess. It's like secretly unplugging a power cord while your opponent is bragging about their machine.
It's incredible nerve.
So later in the evening, Grant suddenly points the gun right at Billy's face and pulls the trigger. The hammer falls on the empty chamber with a loud click. And before Grant can cock the hammer a second time, Bonney draws his own weapon and shoots Grant in the head. He later told a reporter, "It was a game of 2 and I got there first."
That level of psychological manipulation requires an incredibly cold nerve. But, he couldn't outmaneuver the entire territory forever.
Right. The law was closing in.
A former buffalo hunter named Pat Garrett is elected sheriff of Lincoln County, and he is relentless. In December 1880, Garrett and his posse track Bonney to a stone cabin at a place called Stinking Springs. After a tense siege, Bonney surrenders. He is shackled and transported to Santa Fe to await trial.
And what really stands out to me during this period of captivity is his demeanor. A newspaper reporter conducts a jailhouse interview and notes how remarkably relaxed the 21-year-old is, despite facing the gallows.
He was incredibly calm.
Yeah, Bill just looks at the reporter and says, "What's the use of looking on the gloomy side of everything?" The laugh's on me this time.
He goes to trial in April 1881 for the murder of Sheriff Brady. Unsurprisingly, considering the court, he is found guilty and sentenced to hang.
It was a foregone conclusion.
Pretty much. But there is a persistent historical myth regarding his sentencing that requires correction here. A journalist named Arthur Chapman later claimed that Judge Warren Bristol condemned Bonney to hang until he was dead.
Oh, I've heard that.
Right, and that Bonney angrily replied, "You can go to hell, hell, hell." It's a great cinematic piece of dialogue, but the historical court records show that when the sentence was read, Bonney stood completely silent.
See, that silence is almost more chilling, especially knowing what he was planning.
Exactly.
So he is transported back to the Lincoln courthouse to await execution, and he's held under guard on the top floor. Sheriff Pat Garrett leaves town to collect taxes, leaving Bonney in the custody of two deputies, Bob Ollinger and James Bell.
And Ollinger takes the other prisoners across the street for a meal, leaving Deputy Bell alone with Bonney.
Big mistake.
A fatal mistake. Bonney requests to use the outhouse behind the courthouse. On the return trip up the stairs, walking ahead of Deputy Bell, Bonney rounds a blind corner and quickly slips his hands out of the handcuffs.
How does he even do that?
Well, he had remarkably small wrists. It was a physical trait likely exacerbated by years of malnutrition. So when Bell rounds the corner, Bonney savagely beats him with the heavy, loose end of the iron cuffs. He wrestles Bell's revolver away and shoots the deputy in the back as he tries to flee down the stairs.
It's just brutal. Bonney then breaks into Garrett's office, and he's hobbling because he's still wearing heavy leg irons.
Right, the shackles are still on.
He grabs a loaded shotgun that Deputy Ollinger had left behind. He positions himself by the upstairs window. Hearing the gunshot, Ollinger comes running back across the street. Billy leans out the window and calls down, "Look up, old boy, and see what you get."
Such a famous line.
When Ollinger looks up, Billy fires, killing him instantly. He spends the next hour using an axe to sever the chain connecting his leg irons, steals a horse, and rides out of town. And according to local witnesses, he was actually singing as he rode away.
The audacity of that escape completely humiliated local authorities. Governor Wallace places a new $500 bounty on his head. And for almost 3 months, Bonney evades capture.
3 months on the run.
But on July 14, 1881, Pat Garrett tracks him to Fort Sumner. He was acting on rumors that Bonney is visiting a friend named Pete Maxwell.
And the final confrontation happens entirely by accident. Around midnight, Garrett lets himself into Pete Maxwell's house and sits by Maxwell's bed in the pitch black, interrogating him in whispers.
It's totally dark.
Totally dark. Suddenly, the bedroom door opens. Bonney walks in, holding a knife to cut some meat from the porch. Because the room is completely dark, he doesn't recognize Garrett's silhouette. Bonney backs away, draws his revolver, and asks in Spanish, "Quién es?"
Who is it? And Garrett doesn't announce himself. He recognizes Bonney's voice in the dark, draws his own revolver, and fires twice. The first bullet strikes Bonney in the chest just above his heart. The 21-year-old drops to the floor and dies almost instantly.
The boy was dead. But the industry of Billy the Kid was launched that very night. I mean, almost immediately. Men who had hunted him began capitalizing on his corpse.
Oh, right away. Pat Garrett faced immediate public backlash for shooting Bonney in the dark without warning or attempting an arrest. People were outraged.
They thought it was cowardly.
Exactly. So to justify the ambush and rehabilitate his own image, Garrett hired a journalist to ghostwrite a book called The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid.
The Authentic Life.
Right. And that book systematically inflated Bonney's kill count and his criminal mastermind status. It became the foundational text for the mythology. It ensured the public remembered a monster rather than a marginalized kid.
And as with all outlaws, you have the persistent rumors of survival. People desperately wanted to believe he escaped Garrett's bullets.
They always do.
You had men like Brushy Bill Roberts in Texas claiming to be Billy well into the 1940s. You had John Miller in Arizona. In 2005, researchers actually grenaded Miller's bones to conduct DNA testing against old bloodstains from the Lincoln courthouse.
Yes, and as reported by the Washington Post in 2015, those DNA results proved to be entirely useless. The science couldn't confirm anything. But that desperation to find a tangible piece of him continues to drive immense historical speculation.
What type of photos?
Exactly. Consider the photographs. We discussed the authenticated Dedrick ferrotype at the beginning of the hour. That single 2 by 3 inch piece of tin was purchased at auction in 2011 for $2.3 million.
$2.3 million. And that price tag fuels even more frantic searching, like the highly debated croquet tin type.
Oh, the croquet one.
Yeah. In 2010, someone purchased a photo at a memorabilia shop in Fresno that purportedly shows Billy and the Regulators casually playing croquet. Some forensic video experts argue it's authentic, while the New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs and various photo curators argue it's highly problematic. They note the landscape doesn't match the region, and the figures are just too small to definitively identify.
It remains fiercely debated to this day.
So let me ask you, why are we so desperate to believe these outlaws survived? What is it about this 21-year-old that makes people want to find him hidden in random flea market photos?
Well, I think it highlights how historical narratives are manufactured to serve modern emotional needs. If we synthesize why this specific story endures above all other frontier tales, it is because Bonney's actual life was this incredible collision of genuine tragedy, systemic corruption, and an unyielding instinct to survive.
Right.
But his legacy was molded by aggressive public relations campaigns, sensationalized journalism, and a society that hungers for romanticized, independent violence.
He even carried a political charge well into the 21st century.
He did.
In 2010, the governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, formally reviewed a petition to grant a posthumous pardon for Bonney. He was attempting to finally fulfill the promise Lew Wallace made during that secret meeting in 1879.
Over a century later.
Ultimately, Richardson declined, citing the historical ambiguity of the events. So even 130 years after his death, the state couldn't quite decide how to categorize him.
Which is entirely fitting, honestly. He defied neat categorization while he was breathing. He was neither the noble Robin Hood figure that modern pop culture sometimes portrays, nor the one-dimensional bloodthirsty monster that Pat Garrett's ghostwriter invented.
Yeah.
He was a product of his environment.
So, as you go about your week, think about the reality of Henry McCarty. He died at just 21 years old. He was a poor, traumatized teenager who spent the vast majority of his short life just trying not to freeze, starve, or get shot by corrupt authorities.
Right.
Yet he became the ultimate global symbol of American rebellion. What does our enduring fascination with Billy the Kid say about our own deep-seated desires for absolute freedom, endless reinvention, and the elusive promise of a second chance? Perhaps the legend of Billy the Kid is just like that ferrotype photograph. It's a reversed image, projection of what we want to see, staring back at us from a vanished frontier. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.